Hello, everyone, and welcome back to this week's episode of the Rosa and Rubiani podcast, Making Sense of This World. My name is Manas Chavla, and as always, I'm really pleased to be joined by CEO and Head of Research, Berdella Rosa. This week, we're speaking about the EU parliamentary elections, a moment of truth for the future of Europe. The parliament elections will take place all across the continent, but on different days. A gargantuan undertaking, but much smaller when compared to the Indian election, the results for which are rolling out literally in the minutes as we speak. But certainly something that'll have a massive impact on Europe for the many years to come. I mean, the European Union it's a weird supranational body. Brunel, help me understand how this election actually takes place, and the sort of different elements and components that put it together.
Definitely. The EU election process is a complex one. All 27 countries will elect their representatives in the EU Parliament with their own electoral system. In some cases, the electoral system changes for the EU election from a majoritarian, so majority representation, to proportional and so on. But, overall, this is a process that takes place in effectively 4 days from Thursday to Sunday. In most countries, you vote on Sunday and Saturday. In other countries, you vote only on weekdays. And then the election results will be published more or less early next week. Now, the EU Parliament itself is not super powerful. Most of the powers have remained at national level, unlike the US, for example. However, the EU Parliament has one key role. First, it can reject the individual commissioners that might have been posed, and it has happened in the past. But most importantly, it can vote down the EU Commission that has been proposed by the various heads of states and government. And considering that the vast majority of the legislation comes from the Commission, effectively, or the Council, but mostly the Commission, that means that the EU Parliament does have some power. The possibility of rejecting the main source of legislation in the EU is somewhat power.
Yeah, I mean, in the sort of the European landscape is, quite fragmented. Some would say less fragmented than some of its national components, but there's quite a few parties. So help me understand, I mean, what are the main parties where these MEPs belong to, but also for the next parliament, where are the big political bets placed?
Yeah, so we know in national level there are dozens of parties and political formation. Just think about Netherlands, where literally dozens of parties then need to converge to form a government. In Europe is much more simplified because there's a stringent request that a group to be formed needs to have MPs and MEPs, to be more precise, from 7 countries, which of course limits the possibility of forming micro groups just around a specific political party from a specific country and so on. So, given all this, effectively, the groups in the European Parliament are not that many. Starting from the left, you have what is called, in effect, the left, which is a bit more radical, progressive, à la Mélenchon, just to be clear. Then you have the Socialists and Democrats, which are the typical center left party that takes various shapes and forms across Europe. Then you got the Greens, that's easy to understand. The Liberals, that have sometimes both a conservative and progressive component in it, but in most cases tend to be on the progressive side. And most recently, they've been dominated by Macron, and they've been rebranded Renew Europe. To the right, there's the EPP, the Christian Democrats, or the European People's Party, that has been by far the largest political grouping in Europe across the various stages of the EU history. And then to his right, this is what makes it really interesting, you have two right-wing formations. One is the ECR, the European Conservative and Reformist, which seems to be a bit of an oxymoron. But the point was that initially the Tory party representatives from the UK were there, and so that's why you needed this conservative. But most of them considered themselves to be reformist of Europe from the right, so more inclined towards national sovereignty rather than European sovereignty. And then eventually to the extreme right, there's ID, identity and democracy, where Marine Le Pen is, Matteo Salvini is, and so on and so forth. Now, traditionally, considering how votes are counted across Europe, no party has enough votes to control parliament. Therefore, you need to form coalition. And traditional coalition has been a sort of grand coalition, socialist, EPP. Last time around, since numbers were not big enough, they had to bring in also the liberals. Now, what's interesting in this election round is the following. There's an attempt by the wing parties, especially the ID and ECR, to try to form a right-wing coalition with the EPP that would push both the socialists and the liberals into the opposition. That's the big political theme of this election. Is it going to happen? I don't think so. Numbers are not there. Although the ECR will increase their votes, also thanks to Italy's Meloni, who's presiding the group, was not going to be enough. The ID group might win lots of seats, mostly thanks to Marine Le Pen, but will lose those deriving from Salvini, who will lose lots of seats compared to 2019. So I don't think the center-right coalition would take place. However, the big political game is all about replies.
Yeah. So who is going to be, the president of the commission that will grant this political equilibrium? There's sort of a bit of a method to this madness. Tell me more about what this is and who some of the candidates might be.
Sure. So given the power of the parliament to vote down the commission, they came out last time around already with the system of the so-called Spitzencandidate, which means effectively the speaker for that party. And the idea was, if a party gets more votes than the others, then his own Spitzencandidate, so his own speaker, becomes the commission president, which is, I think, a very nice evolution of the political system towards what is considered to be a sovereign institution, like it happens in many democracies. Think about the UK, where the leader of the party becomes automatically the prime minister. This system was inaugurated last time, and already at the first instance was not applied because Manfred Weber was the Spitzencandidate for the EPP, but for a series of political reasons that is long to discuss on the stage, didn't in fact become EU Commission President. And in particular, Angela Merkel didn't like him enough, so to speak, didn't trust him enough to become EU Commission, and preferred to put a very close acolyte, Ursula von der Leyen, that in fact became Commission President. So Ursula clearly is the Spitzencandidate for the EPP, and so in theory she should become again president of the Commission, so confirming her role. However, she's been the one that has been slightly closer to the center-right parties, in particular the ECR. And this is something that both Macron, who's a liberal, and Scholz, who's a social democrat, really didn't like. So they sent a very strong signal. They said, look, if you continue, wooing votes from the right just to support your next commission, you're not going to be the president again. In this respect, there's an important argument that was put forward. So these parties from the right have been often considered anti-European and I don't need to explain about Le Pen and Salvini and so on, and let alone the AFD that was actually kicked out recently by Le Pen from the ID group because of their neo-Nazi positions that clearly couldn't be taken. But even the ECR has on its core, apart from Meloni, she also has PiS, which are the anti-Europeans from Poland, Vox, the anti-European from Spain, the anti-Europeans to the right of Le Pen in France, or Zemmour, and then the Finns, the Swedish Democrats. These are all parties that have been considered pariahs at European level for decades, and they're all part of the group. So ideally, the EPP would like only Meloni to vote for the new commission, but the reality is, why should Meloni break up its own group? So there's a big political game going on, and I think eventually things will only be decided after the election.
Yeah, and then there's also the added fact that the French president and the German chancellor have warned that if von der Leyen wants to sort of aggressively seek these right-wing votes, she might alienate the sort of more center-left and not get reappointed as the commission president. And so one of the possibilities is she gets reappointed, but then voted down by the parliament. So I think, this is one of those interesting elections that, people thought they had figured out and there'd be a sense of continuity maybe months before going into it. But as we actually approach closer and closer to the election, the sort of possibility of a, political institutional crisis happening if we have this sort of happen with the president of the EU Commission could become very, very interesting in the coming weeks. So yeah, much to watch out for. As always, Brunello, thank you so much for your time and insight.
Thank you. Until next time.